Author Chris Kresser, who believes in paleo diets, says that according to studies, eating dietary cholesterol does not lead to higher rates of blood cholesterol in most cases, and even if eating saturated fat and dietary cholesterol does lead to higher saturated fat rates or blood cholesterol, it still doesn't correlate to higher death rates. Do you agree with this? Why or why not?
We don't agree with that. The difference between Chris, the newbie, who's funded by the Cattlemen Association, and Hippocrates, we do clinical research. Our medical team does sophisticated blood tests at the beginning of people's stay, the end. And once a person commences, they graduate our program for free. For the rest of their life, we analyze their blood work. So we accrue amazing amounts of data over decades. And what we have found is almost in 100% of cases where people are eating animal-based cholesterols, their cholesterol goes up. And we're not the first or the only. Look at Esselstyn's work. Look at all of the brilliant work that was done even at the nursing study that we speak about, Dean Ornish's studies. And I can put hundreds and hundreds of studies in front of Chris if he bothers to look at it. Now, do I think that Chris may be a little right, maybe by default, that it doesn't always relate to a heart attack and stroke, and that's true. It's about the metabolic system that the individual has. We go back to what I said in a previous answer, that when we look at people who are aging, high cholesterol seem to be keeping a healthy brain in there. So here's my current thinking on this with all the body of evidence and research and my own experience of almost a half a century, is pretty much when you're young, it's going to actually create much higher chances of a heart attack and stroke, and certainly diabetes. Nobody even talks about diabetes. Notice that over 85% of the people who have diabetic type 2 conditions are all overweight, and there's a reason for that. Fat surrounds a cell, glucose can't get into the cell, remains in the blood, it's called blood sugar then. So Chris better do his homework before he puts his name on a book. Number two, eating meat, in every single legitimate study I've seen ever since I was a boy reading the studies, which I've read thousands of studies, always lead to higher cancer rates. The degradation of the planet Earth, higher cardiovascular disease rates, higher diabetic rates, higher multiple sclerosis, higher Parkinson's, higher ALS. And let me confirm to you, this is not only something I read, we practice at Hippocrates. We were the very first plant-based institute on the planet. There has not been one person who's come through our door out of the hundreds of thousands of people that we've worked with that we haven't put on a 100% organic plant-based diet and clinically observed what happens. So there's reversals of these diseases or relaxing of those diseases when we take away the culprit that Chris thinks is such a healthy thing to eat.
How does someone protect their thyroid?
Thyroid problems today are a major concern. Let's go back a generation ago. A generation's 25 years. If I saw a man with a thyroid problem, I would have been stunned. It was such a rare an event that, it had been stunning. Today, about 20% of men have a thyroid problem. And that's who we know of. There's probably a higher amount. About 70% of women. And many of them we know about. It's either low or high or Hashimoto, or even worse, little growths on the thyroid or even cancers on the thyroid. So what happened? Number one, there's been long-term lack of iodine in the soil and selenium. In this country, it's been about 150 years that we've lacked those. And it was only initially coming from farms that were close to the coastal regions. Now remember, here in America, we call the center of the country the bread belt. Why? That's where most of the farming goes on. They never had iodine in that soil. Selenium was farmed out about 150 years ago, and about the same here along the coast. Europe, it's worse. 250 years it's been gone. Remember, the population of Europe is much larger in a smaller area, and they've been there a lot longer than we have. So the second problem is we invented something called cell phones and laptop computers and desk computers and cell towers and Wi-Fi. And when that happened a generation ago, this aggravates and stimulates the gland, the thyroid, which is an extraordinarily important gland in the body. It regulates hormones. It's a messaging. It's sort of the one who collects a call and dispenses the information from the brain downward to the rest of the body. So with that high frequency right at the thyroid, and you sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day, it's been such an aggravant to it, it throws the frequency of the thyroid and, by the way, other glands off, including the ones in the brain, which are as important, if not more, pituitary and pineal glands. So this is something we work with a lot. We use high-frequency forms of iodine, selenium, and a clean diet. And also we have to work on getting people away from those devices, or at least protecting themselves from those devices. There's different technologies we use. For instance, this one we brought in from Germany. It was Russian-German collaboration, and Anna Maria put it together with them. And this is called a high pulse. So people alive today must be wearing this, or certainly should. I petition you if you want to be well, on your phone now. We have devices that literally dramatically remove the electromagnetic frequency. On the bottom of a router. And then when we're sleeping at night, shut off the computer in the router. And these are the simple things we can do to help to prevent thyroid problems.
Do you eat a 100% plant-based diet? And if so, how long have you been doing it?
I've been on a 100% plant-based diet for 48 years. I'm about 90% raw, and 2 to 3 days a week I'm 100% raw. And there was about an 8-year period of my life I ate a 100% raw food diet. And so anyone who is in my position, who knows what I do, who sees what I do, sees catastrophic disease reversed. Very soon I'm going to be 70 years old, and I have the energy of a 20-year-old. When you are experiencing these things, you'd have to be suicidal not to live and eat this way. Now, of course, diet is what we're speaking about, but it's equally important to exercise, to keep your head straight, to be happy, to be passionate about what you do, to be in love with your family. You know, these are the things that make us whole and complete and well. But the diet is essential. It would be like you could buy a Bentley or a Rolls Royce and sit there, and if you have no gasoline in the diet, you're not going anywhere. You'll just sit and look pretty for a period of time.
Many authors recommend a whole food plant-based diet. Why do you go further and recommend a raw whole food plant-based diet?
Well, you know, what happens with people in the health community, be it a doctor, a naturopathic doctor, even people like me, nutritionists, we get really stuck in our own reality. So what we're willing to do, what we're willing to accept is the border, the boundary, the ceiling for us. Years ago, I got frustrated with my own limitation. So I started to study natural history and other sciences. Sure, biology is interesting, chemistry is interesting, but I wanted to look at physics and quantum biology and natural history. And when I found that we share this beautiful planet with about 8 million other species that we know of, there may be 20, we just haven't identified, many are microscopic, and 100% of those species eat a 100% raw diet. It was pretty easy for me to say, well, gee, do you think 8 million are wrong, or this one species called the human species is right? In an earlier question, we talked about anthropology being wrong, about how they're still teaching and probably won't stop. We're hunters and gatherers. We weren't hunters. We were gatherers. 60% of the people on the planet today are plant-based eaters. We're a minority, only 40% of us on this earth eating animals, and we're the ones destroying the planet Earth. So the fact is, a raw diet contains things that a cooked diet doesn't contain. Complete proteins, if you're eating proper raw foods. Once you cook a food, a plant-based food, and certainly an animal-based food, the proteins are destroyed and changed. Vitamins are almost all gone. You say, well, how do people survive? Most people in the field of plant-based nutrition are interested in what they take away from people. They just don't get what you should give the people. If you take away the animal foods, you're going to see results. If you take away all of the nasty chemicals, you're going to see results. But by the way, you're not going to live much longer. The Loma Linda studies show that vegans only live about 7 years longer than meat eaters and dairy eaters. That's certainly not enough for me. And we don't have solid studies yet, but Hippocrates did a work when we were still up in Boston, at MIT where we showed after 18 months strict adherence to the organic plant-based diet that we don't cook, that we actually slowed cell death down by 3 times. So your cells are going to inevitably die. That's part of the natural process. But if we can slow it by 3 times, isn't that remarkable? And we were looking at that acutely through the eyes of cancer and other diseases at that point. But how about for a healthy person? Isn't that interesting? So there is no doubt in any legitimate person's mind who understand the wholeness of science, not just biology or medicine or natural health care, that we should be eating a raw diet. And we are the living, breathing clinic that has proven that. Now, a lot of people have opinions. Why don't they come and ask us our opinion? We're the first and the foremost, the oldest, with the most experience and the best data.